And I will take the roll. Alder Dorf here. Alder Galvin. Oh, where's Alder? There he is. There he comes. I'll go to Alder Johnson. Here. Alder Corpus Dax. Here. Alder, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Good. Here. Okay. We're all present. I will entertain for the approval of the agenda.
So moved. To approve.
Moved by Alder Johnson, second by Alder Galvin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. And approval of the minutes from the Finance Committee on April 28th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Any comments? Move to approve by Alder Corpus Dax, second by Alder Johnson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Regular business. Report on the designation of the Green Bay Press Gazette as the official newspaper for the city of Green Bay for the approximate annual amount of $50,000. As those of us remember, each year we must do this, and the price is set by the state. So we don't have a lot of wiggle room, but go ahead, staff. You can explain it.
I'm going to defer right to our procurement manager, Calvin Winters.
Yep. So this was opened last week, Wednesday. It has gone up a little bit from last year, about 2 to 3 cents per column. But the Green Bay Press Gazette did indicate that they went with the minimum amount that the state allows them to. So they're following the state guidelines, and obviously they're pretty much our only option. It is the only bid we received.
Okay. Any questions, Alders?
Place on file. It says it's a report.
Let's see.
Is that the right motion? If so, I make that motion.
Yeah, do we need to approve it or receive and place on file? Attorney?
I think you probably should take action on it.
I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
move to approve.
Move to approve by Alder Johnson. Second. Second, Alder Corpus Dax. Further discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right. Let's look at number 2. For consideration with possible action on the City of Green Bay Procurement Manual, which was fascinating reading, I must say. So thank you for providing that to us, staff.
Once again, I am actually going to turn it right over to Calvin Winters.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to bring this in front of the committee. As many of you know, I started about 2.5, almost 3 months ago now. And I had noticed that there was no official written policy for procurement or purchasing. So this is a draft of a procurement manual I put together. This is a similar one to what I have done in past positions. It outlines all of our practices, all of our policies. In general, we follow the state guidelines unless local ordinances or policy are more restrictive. So some of these policies are going to be more restrictive than the state policy, simply by kind of what I've gathered from our policies in the past. So really I'm open to questions if anybody has any, explaining things. This is definitely a policy we would put out to all of the departments to make sure that they understand it. And this would be the policies that would govern all of our procurement procedures going forward.
Alders, any questions?
No.
I like it. I like that you're going to put it out to the other directors, department heads. Have they given you feedback on it already, Calvin?
No, this had not gone out to any of the department heads, mostly Diana and then my staff. We all collaborated on this.
Okay. But it's always a good idea to have other eyes. So I think, I like that you're going to do that. And I think it's great to have something in writing like this and to have it all pulled together. So yeah, good work. Good work.
It's definitely something that is needed in these times. So it's definitely something we're looking forward to having in place.
Great. Alder Stoyer.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm a little surprised that we haven't had anything like this before. Maybe it's just the I'm thankful, Calvin, for you working on this and moving forward with it. I haven't read it through thoroughly yet, but I will. And I think it's a great first start. I'm just surprised we haven't had anything like this in hand before. Does anybody have an answer to that, or we just move forward?
I can tell you that there were some documented procedures. There were some definitely different guidelines on purchasing levels, but I don't think it was all put together in one procurement manager. Manual.
Okay.
Well, so I guess with all the things you did, Calvin, on this, was this just, how long did it take to put this together?
I've been working on that. I started this probably about maybe 3 weeks after I started. So probably about 2 months.
Okay. There's a lot of thought and effort that went into it, but I'm just wondering if you borrowed from other communities, or what were some of the resources that you used to put this together?
So this policy manual is adopted from the one I previously had worked for Portage County in central Wisconsin and drafted this while I was there.
Okay.
So I modeled this manual after that policy manual that I had drafted in Portage County.
And did it work very well?
Just let me do a little interruption here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My internet is going in and out. If I disappear, please let me back in. Okay. Oh, maybe I disappeared.
I just have one more question. Calvin,
go right ahead. I just want to warn you.
Okay. I was just wondering if this worked well enough in Portage County. Obviously, you put it together there, and were there any results or anything from that you can talk about that worked out well, et cetera?
Yeah, this was definitely well received by the staff at Portage County and the legislative branch at Portage County as well. Simply because, again, there was no written policy, so there was sometimes a lot of confusion as to how things were handled, and sometimes there was no consistency. Which this policy and this document will give us consistency throughout all of our procurement procedures.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Calvin. That's all, Alderdorf.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderdorf?
Yes.
So since the discussion came up, and I've also got an email from one of our department heads in the meanwhile, since we haven't had a chance to have our department heads review it, and maybe not all the alders have reviewed it, is it something that we could maybe potentially bring back to the next meeting to give our department heads a chance to review any of the alders to review?
Are you guys able to hear me very well?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, all of you are frozen for me. You're back. I think I might have to go out and come back in again. I would like to not do it at the next meeting though, if you can still hear me, because we're going to have a huge next meeting with the capital improvement. So could we hold it off a little bit and look at this again maybe after the next meeting?
Yes, that's something.
I gotta go. I have to leave and come back. I'm going to leave. Because I can't even. You're all dead. All right. Oh no! Oh, now I hear you again. Oh Jesus!
We're not dead. We're just tired. How about that?
Leave me.
This is not necessarily a timeliness thing that we have to do right away, but within the policy there is a paragraph, a section on emergency purchases. And that would go along with some of the actions that we are in the process of doing. I don't know, Kelvin, if you want to explain a little farther. So I'm not saying that this isn't a timely thing, but I guess that's something that can wait another month. And Kelvin, I know you were involved working with our assistant city attorney. I just wonder if you wanted to add something on that note.
Yeah, so some of the purchases that we are trying to make in order to get staff back into City Hall, including some, protective screens and those types of things. There was question whether or not we could do that because the cost is going to exceed the $5,000 threshold for requiring a competitive process. There is an emergency policy in this document that says if there is a situation that threatens public health, safety, welfare, or if there is a state of emergency declared by the mayor or by the governor of the state, then emergency purchasing policies can be used. Under those emergency orders, it is not necessarily required to do a competitive process. It doesn't necessarily exempt you from using it if it's practical. But if time is of the essence and we are unable to get the required 3 quotes, it allows us to do that and then have written justification. If there's a procurement that's going to be over a $25,000 threshold, then we also have a kind of a backup, checks and balance that I or one of my designees would approve that purchase, just simply so that we make sure that we're not expending money in funds that we don't have, or if it's a purchase of that volume, we may have a possible vendor that we can go to already that we're contracted with.
So again, I don't want to slow down the process. I've actually got another email meanwhile from another department head that would like the chance to review it. So I believe we did have a emergency procedure or policy in place with the old purchasing manager. I'm not sure, Calvin, did you have a chance to were you able to find that document, and does it go similar to what your new procurement manual states?
I did not find any written emergency policies.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they don't exist, but
Right.
I wasn't able to find them when I was looking.
So under the emergency operations plan, it's adopted by the city. Within that document, there is provisions for emergency purchases that are authorized through the city, through the mayor, and also through the emergency manager.
And there are written guidelines that date back at least to 2007 that talk about emergency POs when public safety or best interests of the city are involved, that provide the steps necessary for emergency service provision. So there are documents out there, but not as well crafted and having the criteria that the purchasing manager has put together.
Well, I'm not saying we jumped the gun. It was certainly something we want to make sure we move forward with. I certainly think that sounds like we have some both in our emergency operation. We've got other written documentation. Sounds like we have some that probably would cover us. It sounds like this is something that we certainly should let our department heads also make sure that it follows other protocol that's already in our emergency operation manual and other things. Again, let department heads have a chance to review. Kelvin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm certainly okay, and I would obviously want to make sure that this policy is in line with the emergency operations procedure as well. I want to make sure that those, we don't want those two to contradict each other. So I'd like to review that and to make sure that these two are going to line up with each other.
Would we be best served if those emergency, what was just referenced by Chief Litton and Director Grenier, would it be best if they were to send you what they have so you could incorporate that into this document that you have?
Yeah. If I can get a copy of those procedures, that would be great.
The emergency operations plan is linked on the city website, so anybody can see that.
Okay, I will go out there. I can go out and get that then.
And I will provide electronic copies to you, Calvin.
Okay, thank you.
Because I think it's important to have one source that we go to in these situations. You never know in the future who's going to be in charge, who's aware of what's going on, even subordinates filling in case something should happen to the person in charge. They have one place they know they can go to get all the necessary information. I think that just everyone. I'll make a motion that we refer this back to staff and that Calvin responds or the staff responds, not this next meeting, but the next meeting after that.
Okay. Is there a second?
Alder Johnson, if you were saying anything, you were on mute before.
Yeah, I was literally making the same motion that Galvin made.
Okay. All right, so moved by Galvin, second by Johnson. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Okay. I've switched to a different computer now, so I can't actually see board view. So I'm on Civic Clerk on another computer, but I think it's going to be fine. All right. So we're on number 3. For consideration and possible action on the 5-year combined capital improvement plan and 2020 borrowing. That's correct, right? That's what you guys are. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So this is my vision of this. That there's a lot of information here, a lot. And I would like, I already talked to Director Ellenbecker earlier today about doing a little, bonding budget 101, just for our studio audience and for all of us just to remember, because we only do this once a year or so. And then we're going to just take the first portion of this document today. We're going to, as I said in the email that I sent out to you guys, and Diana has different page numbers than I do, but it's the community investment, the CIP portion, the major projects. We'll stop when we get to equipment replacement. And I think what we'll do is just try to take it in a slow, measured, not boring manner, and we will ask as many questions as we need to ask. And you know what? Whenever it's like PP, CIP, acronyms, let's define those. Let's just tell the studio audience what that all means. So, all right, Director Ellenbecker, you can take it over from here.
Okay, so at a high level, the packet you're seeing in front of you is almost the identical packet that was included 2 weeks ago. Because 2 weeks ago, we wanted to be informational so that you could start taking a look at how large the document is, what kind of information we had available to you. So really, none of the numbers have changed since students was out there last week. Last week we didn't take any action. Now this time you do have an option of taking some action on this document. But what happens is what you have in front of you is really our 2020 to 2024 capital improvement plan for the city of Green Bay. And again, this would include the request for the items needed, which are your expenses, and then some revenue sources. And this document includes anything that would involve general levy dollars, parking utility dollars, storm, TIFs, and sanitary. And what the document will do, it will show you all the expenses that are basically items that are needed and have been requested by department heads. Whether, again, we broke it into 3 categories. You have major items, you have equipment, and you have fleet or vehicles. And so I will walk you through kind of the document. But what it's in front of you is anything that's in the 2020 column. The majority of it are all items that the department heads have asked for or requested that we borrow money for so that they can still complete these projects or purchase these items. These items, the majority of them have not been purchased yet or can started at this point. And what happens is if we can't find another funding source, or we can't find grants, we don't have any other money coming in, weren't able to put it in our budget. It is on this list. It's a need. So right now, anything in that 2020 column is almost things that we still need to borrow for. What happens is within our debt policy, it says that anything that's a long-term asset which outlives the debt in which we issue it for. So there's something called, we either take out bonds, which are 20 years, the city can take out 20-year bonds, or they can take out notes, and notes can go anywhere from 1 year to 10 years. And again, that's for anything from repairs of buildings to acquisitions to improvements, renovations, equipment, fleet. Those are all items that are eligible within our debt policy and are eligible to take out a bond or a note for. So what you're going to see in front of you as we go down, and let me tell you, if you're looking at the packet, let me find the page that I'm going to be referencing. What in front of you is there's quite a few summary pages, and I'm going to go back to the memo. It has a lot of information. These are questions that were asked over the last year since the first time we brought this around. This is the second year we're bringing the same information back to the council. And so some of the questions that were asked over the last year now have been incorporated into the memo. But if you go to what would be considered page 24 in the packet, there's something called 2024 expenses and revenues by funding source by year. That is the overall, that is taking this whole 400-page document and rolling up to one cover sheet, one cover page to tell you what the dollars are that rolls up in this packet. As Alder Dorf has stated, what we will be looking at is the top section of this document, and there are major capital equipment. So if you see the top section is general levy. General levy are any expenses or that if we incur these expenses, the general levy or your constituents' tax bill will help pay for these. If we borrow the money, they will help pay for this debt service, which includes your principal and then interest in borrowing this money. So what you're seeing is in the general levy, we have expenses for the Department of Public Works. You have expenses for fire, park and rec, city hall, community and economic development. So if anyone doesn't know what that means, next item behind that one says taxable. It's the type of borrowing that means it would not be an exempt borrowing. And then police. So for our major items, right now there is a need for $12.2 million worth of items that need to be, that are being requested. For,
Dr. Ellenbecker, what page is that on again? I'm sorry to interrupt. What page is that? What page?
24.
Of the 391. Is that what it is?
Nope.
Nope, sorry. I'm in the wrong spot. Please.
There's 429 pages. Does someone else confirm that that's the document? It's
I just want to
429.
make sure I'm in the right area. For some reason, I'm not.
Yeah, the whole document is, but the document that this portion of it is like what he's saying, 300 some.
It was 391. So I just want to make sure I'm in the right spot. That's
Right.
all.
So page 1 of, if you're looking at it, if it's just that little document.
I've got that page.
That's it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. So the general levy is anything that is paid for by a taxpayer's tax bill. Then the next section, what we call other funding sources. These are 100% supported by other funding and is not on your tax bill. They are supported by TIF, which is increment from within a tax district. That is how they would pay their share of the debt service back. Parking utility has would expenses be paid for by their revenues. Sanitary and storm would pay for their debt through rates that they incur to their customers. So as you can see, for 2020, what has been requested is $26 million, just basically $26.1 million in major equipment or major capital projects. As you can see, as you go down across the page, this is a 5-year projection on needs, so that you can have a bigger picture of all the needs that the city has by the different departments. So again, there's 2 things we focus on: the general levy, that is what affects your mill rate and your tax bills going forward, but the total borrowing does affect the overall city's levy, debt capacity. The city of Green Bay, you are allowed to go up to 5% of your equalized assessed value. The city right now is only at about 2.4% of that 5% that the state allows. So we are not close to any capacity of going over our debt limit. So we do have availability there. And I want to keep going down the document, just explain this over this summary page. Then we go down, we also have needs for equipment. So you're going to see different departments have requested equipment. Again, this is general levy. If we were to borrow for these items, it would be paid for by the tax bill. And again, what happens is if it becomes a 10-year or 20-year borrowing, it gets amortized over that length of time. So a small portion of it would be paid for over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So we have borrowing, some requests for DPW, fire, information technology, park and rec, and police. Next item is fleet. Also, again, if we were to borrow for these items, it would be paid for by future tax levy. And community and economic development, this is all fleet or vehicles. They are looking for some vehicles for the inspections. You have DPW, they're looking for equipment and sanitation trucks. Fire department, you have park and rec, police and transit. That it comes up to 2.9 million. We have the next line is very, it's something, there's an issuance cost if you borrow. So I had to add that in. So for 2020, the initial request is $31.4 million worth of borrowing. The next section just summarizes it by general levy. We're looking at $17.4 million of needs for the general levy. And other funding sources, again, TIF, sanitary, storm, parking. There's 13.8 small issuance costs. So we have about a $31 million request for borrowing. And as you go down to some of the funding that is recommended for the general fund or the general levy, I would say, if you right above it, it says general levy is looking for $17.4 million. This is a recommendation that it looks like we would still need to, these are all the funding sources. And right now we have on top that we would be asking to borrow 8.3 million for bonds, 3.3 million of notes. So really $11.9 million if you add those two rows together for the general fund. Looking for some money to borrow from the state trust fund loan. We had 420,000 of these requests included in our budget. And then we also have other funding in 2020 that will pay for some of these items, including vehicle registration, or we call it wheel tax. A TIF is going to pay $200,000 for one of these projects, local improvements, some carryover. So that is going to, that is how we will fund the 17.4 million requested if we move forward with this borrowing request. Again, I just want to quick explain the document so we can kind of understand how this all works. Again,
is there a way, I'm sorry, is there a way to put this on the screen so people can see it or not? I mean, I'm looking at it, but there are other people that might have questions. There's a lot of information to be held here.
Did that work?
Yes, exactly. And then you can point out different things, and so that we can all kind of follow it. You can put a cursor on it. I just think it's important. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Alder. So we talked about the major items. These are the funding sources, and then your equipment that has been requested by the general levy departments, fleet that was requested by general levy. So again, we're looking at $31 million requests. 17.4 million is for the general levy. Almost 14 million from other funding sources. Within the general levy of that 17 million up here, we are looking if we have no funding sources to offset some of the borrowing requests, and that leaves about 11.9 million. These two added together shows you that we have $11.9 million is what the borrowing is. And then we also have funding sources looking for 13.8 million. So right now we're looking to borrow 25.7 million for 2020. To another request is how much are we going to pay off? So if the general levy is wanting to borrow 11.9 million, we're going to be paying off 7.2. That would say that our overall debt would go up about $4.7 million on the general levy side. And again, this is a 5-year document. So not only as we're looking closely at the 2020 column, we should be looking at the future columns, including 2021, because 2021 budget is right around the corner for consideration. And so if you choose and to amend or allocate or move something back to another year, it's going to get included into the 2021. And of course, there's a ripple effect. Again, very, very high level overview. What I do want to say is to finish off on the bottom, right now we're looking at a general levy borrow of 11.9 million. General levy payoff this year will be 7.2, leaving a 4.7 increase. This was mentioned in a previous, when we did the 2019 borrowing, we had gone out to a financial advisor called Ellers, and they had given a strong recommendation that we stay closer to 8 million each year as we're paying off $7 to $8 million. If we want to keep our budget line on an annual basis for our debt service relatively flat, you would want to only borrow as much as you're paying off. At this point, we're looking at borrowing an extra $4.7 million, which on a year-over-year basis will probably increase our mill rate by about 12 cents if we were to borrow this additional 4.7. And every year, if we stayed at this $12 million level, we would be increasing our mill rate annually. So again, strong recommendation from a previous financial advisor that we are trying to get this down closer to 8 million. If we could move it down to 10 million, you'd be, kind of moving forward, assuming about a 6% increase on debt service. If you leave it alone and borrow the 11.9 million, you will probably, like I said, your mill rate increase will probably be about 12 cents. And again, so at this time, I mean, I know we're going to look through the top portion of this document. This is a very high level summary. The detail is all behind this in this pack. But again, we're really looking for some direction from, if we would prefer not to borrow the $11.9 million, we have to decide, and the council has to help us, give us some direction what your priorities are. I mean, do you want to move forward with pavement, the Main Street, bridge repair? Do you want to go ahead with building and repairs and improvements to buildings? Do you want to move forward with more park and wildlife improvements? Do you need the equipment and fleet? So that is at a high level what is included in this document.
Thank you. That was a very good explanation. So we will need to be looking through this. And what we're weighing is, this is what the directors, the department chairs had said they needed, or that they'd like to have. This would be good for the city if we get this. On the other hand, it would cause us to raise the mill rate quite a bit more than maybe we'd want to do that at this point. So we maybe are looking at what are some ideas, what are some ways we can challenge our departments to maybe move something or not do it this year, do it a different year. And I know we can't keep pushing it off, but I do think it might be more realistic to get down to maybe 10.5 million than to stay at, I don't know how we'd get to 8. I don't know how we'd get to 8. And I don't think we should be at almost 12. So I think that's part of what's going to happen now as we talk about it and we go over each section. So is that what you would envision, Director Ellenbecker, that we would start by going over the first section, which is DPW?
Yep, and I can go. Thank you, Alder Sawyer, again for reminding me to put it up on the screen. The next page, I just want to, through this document, this just explains also overall all of that 11.9 million.
Can I ask a question real quick before we get into this?
Yes.
Okay, so borrowing versus just paying for it outright. Obviously, if we can do that, and we're talking about the levy, and I don't know if we know exactly how much wiggle room we got on the levy limit and that, but are we better served, instead of taking out a loan, raising the levy limit, but paying for some of these items outright? Borrowing
yes,
$12 million.
That would be your ultimate solution. Again, these are 2020 requests, and our 2020 budget is complete. So out of everything that was requested, only $420,000 of these items were put into our 2020 budget. On that last page I showed you, I didn't put a projection. The goal and hope or goal is to, this year we were able to put in $420,000. I do have a very aggressive saying every year, could we put an extra about $500,000 into our budget and not borrow for it? That would be ideal. But unfortunately, what's in 2020 budget, what's being asked for now is we're past the 2020 budget. It can't go into this budget. It could get pushed off to a 2021 budget, which we'll be deciding this fall, which only would be delaying a project potentially by 6 months. That is definitely an alternative. Putting it in a budget, of course, would be paid for money that we are getting in that year, and we would not be incurring interest costs, and we would not be paying for that item over the next 5, 10, 20 years, whatever we take the length of the loan out for.
Is there room in the levy, after we cover all our costs, like for increases in salaries and benefits and the cost of gas going up and that, is there room after that's all done for us in the levy to do something like that, to pay for more out of the levy and instead of borrowing?
With an adjustment, a debt service adjustment, we are allowed to do that. On the second page of the memo, I have information on our levy and a calculation based on about 1% net new construction. That would allow us to go up, take our expenses up about $600,000. However, a 2% increase of our expense, 2% increase for all our employees is more than that amount. So just that 1% increase, projected a 1% increase, will not cover our increases in expenses. But we do have an adjustment that we can take within the levy, and we were able to take that last year, which allowed us to take our levy up 3% or $1.5 million. That capacity is still there. We are allowed to take another adjustment. So it's really the will of the council how much you still want to take a mill rate increase this year. It would allow you to take something other than above the $600,000 adjustment.
And so, right, today is not when we're going to decide on mill rate, right? I mean, this is just the piece of it. But to me, it's like when you're living in your house, most people can't write a check out for their house. They can't write a check out for their car. You take out a loan, maybe 30 years for the house, maybe 5 years for the car. So that's what the bonding is about. And then you have to pay the interest on it because you can't, and cities are like people, they can't afford to pay it all. So we have to borrow some money. We have to. And we can, so that we can borrow less money, and the fewer dollars we borrow, the less we pay in interest. So that lowers it for future years, right?
Correct.
But we can't, there's just no way you can increase your levy enough to not have to borrow.
Oh, correct.
Correct. You can't. No. So,
Not in the short term, correct.
right. So we're going to have to, when we get to the point of determining what our mill rate's going to be, we're going to have to decide how much can we, and there's a cap on it. You can't raise them a lot, but how much should the mill rate go up, and how much should we borrow, understanding that we then have to pay off the interest. And before we do that, we have to look at what's being asked for and say, is there anything that could come out of this document? Is there anything that, could be pulled out? So I think that's what we're doing right now, isn't it, Director Allenbecker? We're looking at what are the things that maybe we could kind of question a little bit and talk about?
Correct. We should be looking at the column of 2020. That is what is being asked for, so that these projects or these items can still be purchased. And, I would expect that there would be some questions from the council members to the department heads to understand the request that they have in front of them. And if there is after discussion review, if there are some amendments, that would be helpful to help bring this borrowing request down.
So, committee, I asked you to come prepared with some questions. I have some, but Alder Steuer, yes.
Oh, thank you, Alder Dorf. I think in most years, we get this each year and we look at it and we decipher it and we try to come up with reasons to do this and do that. With the recent health issues going on, the pandemic out there, there's something that's laying out there that, to me, could affect this over a period of time. And I would like input from others on that as well, because I keep thinking it's kind of like apples and oranges. We're looking at all the finances here. We're looking at bonding and levy and all that type of good thing. But then we also have to look at the hard facts that we're not bringing in as much monies to the city on permits, et cetera. And there's universities, there's places that are furloughing people and laying people off. And I don't know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I really am concerned about some of the things that are going on in the world and how we as a city can continue to do what we do on a normal state. And I right now, I don't think we're in that normal state. So if somebody can clarify a few things for me on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Like what exactly?
Well, like I said, over time, I've talked to a couple of the department heads too, and things seem to be on track right now, and we can do things for the budget, for this year. But as time goes on, if we are not allowed to collect the monies that we need to collect, for permits and keeping our mill rates somewhat down, I just see certain things coming up over a period of time that might compromise our ability to do this type of projection year after year.
Yes, and I think part of what we're wanting to be working on today is prioritizing some things.
Well, that's good.
And looking at some things that maybe we won't be able to get done this year or next year. But I think we can only do that by going through the document.
And I agree. I think part of the worry, though, is like knowing what to look at and what not to look at, or what we should keep or not keep. And I think part of it is maybe not being fully informed on every nuance of that. So I don't know if this is a conversation that we need to have at this committee and or at council, but it's going to be an interesting dialogue moving forward. And I'm prepared. Go ahead.
Okay, I think we don't actually have all the answers right now. And I don't think we can even get all the answers right now. I think as we get closer to our budget meeting in late October, early November, We'll have a deeper understanding of what the federal government, what the state government might be supplying, how much revenue we may have lost over the summer, and where we're sitting. We're going to be at a different place.
Right.
Actually do the budget. We're just deciding right now on the bonding portion of it. Is that correct, Director Ellenbecker? I don't want to say something.
That is correct. That is correct. And later in this on this agenda, we are going to be addressing, touching on the shortfalls of revenue and expenses for the 2020 budgets. So that is later in this agenda.
So let us move forward in an organized fashion and look over this document, and then some of these questions may just be answered, but if they're not, then we'll address them, because I don't think we can address them right now. I don't think we have all the information. Is that all right, Alder?
That's fine. That's fine. That's
right.
fine. I just needed to air it out a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe I'll just ask the first question for Director Grenier. And I think he's on there. I can't see everybody anymore now that we're in this new view. But the Main Street Bridge, of course, we don't want it to fall down. But that's $1,450,000. That's a really large chunk. So Director Grenier, is there anything that any way you can think of that if we needed to, are there grants? Can we move it to a different year? Can you tell me your feelings on that, Director Grenier?
We could definitely move it to another year.
What would be the downside?
Do you want the honest answer?
No. Wait, yes. I absolutely want the honest answer. Okay.
The honest answer is the hydraulic system malfunctions and the bridge never opens again.
And that could happen, right?
Yes, it could.
That would not be good for the boats.
Or cars.
Well, if it's closed, it's fine for cars. It's the opening that's the problem. But Director Grenier, what do you think? Is there any other way to get some money for this?
We've approached the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. We think that there's a possibility of getting a couple $100,000 to $250,000 in reimbursement potentially in 2021.
And of course, everyone wants pavement projects.
Yeah.
When you look at the whole capital projects, you're 51%, which is always the case. DPW always has the biggest amount. So, and you're first.
Well, and I will tell you that before we brought this forward, since we brought it forward back in late February, I have already shaved $1.3 million off of my request for this year.
I believe it. I believe everyone's shaved off from their request. So then it's going to be up to council to, just going back to Director Ellenbecker, we can't raise the levy 12 cents, right? Isn't that over the amount we're allowed to?
That's a mill rate increase.
I'm sorry. I meant the mill rate. I'm sorry.
Yep, and that would be I'm saying just this effect would raise the mill rate increase. However, if you had other funding sources, other things, you could definitely offset it with some other funding source. I'm just not sure that that's how you want to spend your mill rate increase is all in debt service.
Right. Alder Corpus Dex, are you talking?
Just a quick question for Director Grenier. You said there's the possibility for some reimbursement. Does that only apply to 2021, or like you wouldn't see that in 2020?
Correct. We would have to expend the money in 2020. We would have to apply for reimbursement, which we would receive in 2021.
Okay. So if you spend the money in 2021, could you possibly get the reimbursement in 2022?
Yes.
Is that also an option? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
How often does that street fail? That bridge. It has failed a few times, right?
Oh.
Oh, it hasn't. Well, which one gets closed all the time? That's the Walnut Bridge?
No, this is the bridge that closes frequently, but I don't characterize, it's not failing.
It's not failing. Okay.
It's stopping the way that it's intended to. It stops before it damages itself.
Okay.
Will this hydraulic system prevent as many stoppages as it has been experiencing?
No, the hydraulic system is 20 years old and is in need of rehabilitation. We have a total of 4 hydraulic pumps, 2 on either side of the river. So there's 2 pumps, redundant pump systems on both the east and west sides. Going from memory, I don't remember which of the 2 sides, but one of the 2 sides, one of the pumps we don't use anymore because we're seeing brass in the hydraulic oil, which means that there are parts failures inside. If one of them has experienced that, the others have experienced to a certain degree, maybe not to the same extent. When that happens, now we have metal in the oil, which corollary to your vehicle engine is excessive wear. That metal in the oil can translate into the hydraulic motors, can also represent in the hydraulic, because there's the pump and then a hydraulically driven motor. There's multiple systems going on inside that bridge. It's rather complex. But the net effect is there's a very real possibility that somebody hits the switch to lift that bridge and the motor simply just doesn't drive it. The bridge doesn't go up, or it goes up and it doesn't come back down.
Can you fix part of it one year and part of it the next year? If there's 4 of these things?
Absolutely.
Well, what's the bad thing about that though?
Well, if you replace one of the 4 each year, any of the other 3 could fail. At any one time, 2 of the pumps are sharing a common oil reservoir. So if you replace one of the 4 pumps and the second of the pumps connected to the same oil reservoir on that side of the river starts to deteriorate, now you have metal shavings in the oil again, which is going to damage the brand new pump you just put in.
Okay, so really, can we cut it in half? Can we do half one year and half the next year? I mean,
again, anything is possible. It's, do you want to roll the dice?
Alder Dorf, may I ask a question?
of course, Alder Gerlach.
Thank you. Sometimes it's really helpful to have the village idiot at the table, and you've got her. Because I'm new to this, and finance is my weakest area. So I will do this entire document twice, because there's no other way I could possibly even listen to what people are saying. And tell me if I'm taking the wrong approach. I looked at the priority that Director Grenier placed, and I looked, and I know we're not talking about fleet yet, but for the fleet, I looked at the age and condition of every vehicle, because those were all stated. And so for me, for example, when I look at major capital projects, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but it just seems to me, rather than taking the biggest project other than paving, I was looking for the lowest priority. So I know it's small, but I see that West Shop new windows seem to be a really low priority. And I thought, well, maybe there's a place to save $30,000. I'm afraid that's the only thing I found under DPW that was a low priority. I found nothing under fire, but when I got to Parks and Rec, I found Finger Road concession stand restrooms, very low priority. $150,000 perhaps could be cut. Wildlife Sanctuary, Nature Center, security and safety upgrade, $50,000. So I took a completely different approach because I don't know what I'm doing. And that is...
Well, we're going to get to that, Alder Gerlach. We're starting with DPW. We're going to get to all of them. And I understand the approach you're taking was different, right? And you're right. I didn't actually look at the biggest ticket item, which is pavement, but the Main Street Bridge repair. If we were to take $15,000 out, which we could, how much of that adds up to $2 million, which is kind of what we might be kind of looking for?
Well, I found an awful lot of things, but
All right. Well, we'll get to those when we get to those sections, but we're going to stick right now, DPW. So what do you have on DPW?
I have in major capital projects, I'm afraid I can only save you $30,000.
And so what do you think about that, Director Grenier? What if you don't get windows this year?
That's the council's prerogative. What I can tell you is I would like to think that after knowing me as long as you have, both with bonding request and with budget, I don't have fluff in there. If I've asked for it, it's necessary, okay? The pavement projects, that is a direct reflection of what the council has directed me to do. So if you wish for me to reduce my pavement projects, which again, I've already reduced by 1.3 million for this year alone, subsequent to the approval of my annual capital improvement program through the committee and the council, if you wish for me to do that, I will find the money. But the council will need to own that.
I'd actually like to hear from Alder Johnson on that because he has a lot of experience with improvement and services.
And similarly, if the council wishes to not do the Main Street Bridge repair, that's your prerogative. What I don't want is, God forbid, something negative happens with that bridge and all eyes point at the Department of Public Works. We had it in here, okay? Now, the other thing I am going to say is I have been cautiously advising for months about, as Alder Gerlach has talked about, my fleet and equipment purchases, which have been removed from the budget and put into the bond request, okay? I have been cautiously advising about increasing the amount of pavement projects and the type of work we're doing, that we are going to get to a point where we can't support the bond request to do what I've been asked to do. We're there.
Okay.
So some decisions have to be made, and those have to be council decisions. They are no longer within this department.
Okay, I'd like to hear from Alder Johnson. And because I think he has got that experience with improvement services and the pavement projects. So how do you feel about reducing pavement projects, Alder Johnson?
Well, and if I may, Alder Dorf, I actually have a few maybe higher level questions that I think affect how we talk about each of these items. If I could get maybe some answers from Director Ellenbecker on some of these items.
Okay.
Director Ellenbecker, could you just quickly touch on, you had mentioned that if we take out notes that are 1 to 10 years, bonds are 20 years. What is the difference in the interest rate on those items?
A 1 to 10 year note. Last year came in, I don't have the exact number in, but a 1 to 10 year note is a lower interest rate than a 20-year bonding or borrowing, because the shorter you go for it, the less interest you will have. I believe last year our rates were anywhere around about 2.5% under. They were both under 3%, but the notes, I'd have to pull it exactly, but the notes being a shorter period are slightly less than a bond for 20 years.
Okay, so they're very favorable rates right now.
Correct.
Okay. One of the things that I noticed was the carryover funds, and that we had some listed in 2020, but not in any other years. Do you have like an outstanding balance of funds for which we've bonded, projects were not done, or projects came under budget? What happens with that funding?
I'm going to say what happens is I have the detail from Director Grenier for the 2020 budget, which includes all of his requests, less any of his miscellaneous funding. If you look on the top of the major page, the DPW, the pavement projects, where you're seeing 8.4, and then you're seeing in the years after, it's down to 4 million and 5 million. That's because any carryover, any wheel tax, any other funding sources are still netted out of that number, as we do not have all the details specific in the very detailed capital improvement plan that you get annually from the Director of Public Works.
Okay, and I'm even thinking more broadly too about every department, right? Because normally in another organization, you just run a balance sheet. I don't think that translates into what we're doing here. But normally, right, you run a balance sheet and you can see, hey, you know, we bonded for, I don't know, a couple $1 million for Bay Beach, but we haven't actually put the beach in, so that money's somewhere, right? Like, is there such a document that shows us funding for which we've bonded again but haven't spent it?
It's not quite that clean, but yes, we have, I think I just ran the numbers, we have 95 funds. So if any, Bay Beach has its own fund. So at that point, they track their capital separate. So if, yes, they borrowed so much money and it has been unspent, it is still sitting in that fund. If the project hasn't been completed yet, that money is still really being allocated for that project, because most times it's very specific. For any notes and any bonds that are taken out that are tax exempt, which are the type that we would go for, and that has the lower interest rates, it's very specific what you have to spend it on and the timeline in which you spend it. So we keep it very clean in different separate funds. So if it was borrowed for Bay Beach and it was borrowed for that specific purpose, or again, if it was DPW equipment, it's separated, we watch it, we track it. Once that equipment was purchased, sometimes it's slightly under and sometimes it's slightly over what we had originally purchased, because there's an estimate at one time. If it's slightly under, it stays in that same fund. So we have this 400 series funds. So everything that fire, police, or DPW or our IT department, the equipment that they have has a separate fund. So I can run a balance sheet at any point for any one of those funds, which includes any of this borrowing. Again, so what happens is, yes, if there is money that was unspent, it stays in that fund. Throughout the last year, on a regular basis, I am contacting the department heads and saying, hey, I see you have a fund balance. What is it going to be, or how do you have it allocated? Is it left over from a previous project? In some cases it has. There's going to be a point, like last year, there was some money left over in a fire building repairs. So Chief Litton was able to take a couple items off of his request last year, and he was able to use that carryover balance. So that is on a regular basis. Contact all the department heads, look at their specific fund balance, find out whether or not it's all being allocated, if there is any way that they can take something off this list and use a previous fund balance. So that is a regular discussion that has happened. So there might be something on here that maybe it was on here last year, but it didn't show up this year. And maybe it's because they were able to redirect some carryover funds. And so that they didn't have to request it or borrow the money going forward.
Okay, so ultimately, again, why I'm asking the question is I'm trying to determine if there are balances in those carryover funds that are not being reflected in the 2020 year here that could potentially be leveraged to reduce our overall borrowing. And it sounds like you could get that information, you just don't have it handy.
Correct. It's not probably clean and easy, but yes, yes. And I'm just saying, yes, it has been taken into consideration, but could it be pulled again? Yes.
Okay.
But wait, just to clarify, you're asking if there's like this pool of money, Alder Johnson, that we haven't even taken into consideration? And then the answer is yes? Is that?
No,
that's not the answer. Okay.
I said I can pull you the fund balances, and according to the department heads that I have talked to in this last year, I've asked every one of them if they had money left in their fund balance that isn't already allocated and was already part of a previous purchase, if there's money left over. And again, fund balance, like Bay Beach, that is one that the project was allocated. It was for a specific project. And at that point, they haven't spent it all, but it's still allocated because that's how it was borrowed and it has to be spent for that. Another good one is the Colburn Pool. As you remember, many years ago, we borrowed $2.5 million. Over the last year, they did much of the renovation. That number that is being wound down right now at this point, there's probably another 2.5, maybe there's a couple 100,000 left. But so there is a fund balance left, but it is still being allocated. It really is still obligated to a project. So I have gone through and I can run you fund balances, but I'd have to work with each department head for help us explain what those fund balances are still allocated for, which projects haven't been fully spent and what they have that money allocated for. So I'm not saying that there's money sitting around to still be tapped. I can run the numbers and department heads can help explain why there's a balance in their funds. But at this point, they have already come back and said that the money is already allocated for projects that have previously been bonded for or requested.
So that money is spoken for. So that money really doesn't exist except on paper, right? I mean, it has to be used for what it was borrowed for.
Correct. But again, the question by Alder Johnson is, can I run him fund balance reports? Yes, I have. Again, we have 90 some funds, and we can run a balance sheet at any point for any fund or all of them.
So what happens if you have a project, just a hypothetical here, we bond $2 million for a project goes to bid, the bids come in at 1.8 million, we have $200,000 left over. What happens to that 200,000?
It currently does sit in that fund. It does stay in that fund, and at that point, the director then can reallocate it for it. It has to be used for the specific purpose. So let's say it was a park project and they got lucky and their project came in at 1.8 and not 2 million, but it was specifically for, let's say, park building maintenance or something like that. They would have to turn around and use that remaining $200,000 for what the specific purpose was, and they can reallocate it for another park project.
Okay, and I don't want to send you on a wild goose chase if there's not any substantive there, but if it's easy enough to run a report, I do think that's valuable for us to see what is in those fund balances. The other question that I have is, you mentioned, okay, so we're at about 11.9 million for the bond request. The bond counsel has recommended that we don't exceed, talk about the consequences if we exceed that 8 million.
The consequences is if you continue to borrow more than you're paying off, your debt service line in your annual budget line that we have to pay off on an annual basis with interest is just going to continue to go up, and it's not going to. The last couple of years, it's been right around 9 million out of our $100 million budget, and so if we continue to borrow more, that number will creep up. And so the estimate from our Ellers last year was next year it will probably increase your budget about 11-12 cents. On your debt service line in your annual budget.
Are we at risk of receiving a bond rating decrease?
We just had a decrease, and so nothing major has changed for us, because as our percentage, unless we have a big change where our fund balance goes down, which is based on your actuals, or your debt increase. As a percentage of your total equalized value is way out of whack. I can't tell you that. As Moody is as an outside firm, and they look at a lot of criteria, including your economics. I don't believe that we are in the risk of dropping another rating, as it just happened. But last time it happened, they gave us 1 to 2 year notice warning that it might drop, and then they gave us a negative outlook, and by the second or third years when we had a drop. We are not in that situation at this point, so I don't believe we're going to be dropping another rating. If that rating does drop, what that truly means is it might be a little harder to sell your bonds, which means our interest rate would be slightly higher when we borrow. However, a AAA3 is what we are currently. A AAA is still in the very high percentage of municipalities, and anything with a AAA is still considered a very good high rating.
Okay, and then one final question I'll do for Director Ellenbecker, and then I just have one for Director Ganier. We have focused predominantly, or talked at least up to this point, about reducing items from the capital project plan to get down to that that desired level. But one question I do have is I guess, what percentage of our levy is rooted in like staff versus other expenses? I know normally staff is a very high percentage, right?
Yes, in 2020 budget, the general fund, and again, I typically am talking general fund, and that is because that specifically touches and is affected by the tax bill, your constituents' tax bill. Our budget last year was about 110 million, but the general fund itself was $86 million. And of that, the salaries were 86%. So of that 86 million, 75 million was specifically to salary, wages, and fringes. And that's your general fund. Then once you get out of that 86 million to get, then we have about a $9 million budget for debt. So that takes your 86 million up to about 95 million. And then we have $1.5 million, 1.2 million that we have for transit. And then you have some other expenses for your, some of your capital borrowing and so other things. And that's how you get up to your 110. So the only reason why I'm saying it that way is really our salaries are all within the general fund, and that's 86 million and 86 million, and 86% of it are salaries and wages, and fringes about $75 million.
Okay. And the reason I bring that up, I want to be very clear about this. I am not proposing that we cut staff, but I am proposing that every option be on the table for us when we go through this type of process. And certainly one of the easy ways to get the total request down is to cut out capital projects, but please do correct me if I'm wrong, Director Ellenbecker. One other option would be that we could reduce levy spending to help supplement borrowing.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to know, I just want the finance community to understand that is an option. It does, but obviously I wanted that percentage because I want everyone to understand how significant of a percentage our overall budget is in that type of thing. Okay, and then the last question then that I would have for Director Grenier, which goes back to the item, Alderdorf, that you had brought up, which was about the Main Street bridge repairs. And I may be oversimplifying this, Director Grenier, but if you were to put this in terms of the likelihood of failure on that bridge in the hydraulics, if you have two hydraulics, you have a 1% chance of failure. If you've got something that's about to crumble, % chance of failure. If you were to, identify the spectrum, the likelihood is, would you be able to identify that?
I could not. The best I can give you is 50-50 odds. It either fails or it doesn't.
Okay. All right. I'm done, Alderdorf.
Okay. Well, and I'm not suggesting that everything is to come out of the major capital project. Page 1. This is where we're at. We're going to be looking at a lot of things. I still would like some feedback from you, Alder Johnson, if you're willing, on pavement projects, because yes, council has directed, Improvement and Services has directed Grenier to increase those road projects. That's a huge chunk. Do you see any wiggle room there, Alder?
I don't feel comfortable, suggesting that we should eliminate without being able to have global discussion about the entire. The real more direct answer is I think there ought to be wiggle room in every item here. I think Alder Gerlach made a good point, which is the priority of each of these items, and priority should really be based on probably necessity first, followed by where are we hearing the greatest demand. And I think pavement projects, at least for me, is certainly what I'm hearing the most that the residents want to see. It's not to say that I wouldn't support a reduction in that if it meant getting us down to the right borrowing level, but I'd want to talk about the balance of the proposal, the whole plan as well.
I agree. Maybe we should get off of DPW and move on. Because
Alderdorf?
Yes.
I would like to make a clarify or correct something I said earlier. When I was saying we were at AAA, I was answering Alder Johnson's question. I gave a wrong rating. We are actually certainly currently sitting at a AA3. A AAA is the best you can have. Then you drop down to AA, AA1, AA2, AA3. So we are still sitting at a AA3 And so that, again, anything with a double A is considered a very good rating yet. So I added an extra A on earlier when I was speaking.
Okay. All right. So just plant the seed in DPW's head. Think about possibilities, and let's move on to fire. Unless anyone else has a question about the items on DPW. I can't see anybody because I'm in a different view again here.
Alderdorf.
Yes.
I kind of listened to what Alder Johnson said. I agree with quite a bit of that. And in my district, of course, it's pavement projects as well. But like I said, we have to look at the overall bonding requests and such moving forward. But I just wanted to make that statement as far as my district. We're looking for more road improvements. So.
Right. All right.
I have a quick question.
Oh, Alderdorf. Yes, go ahead.
Since salaries were brought up, I know we have a lot of summer staff. How does that play into, especially in the parks? How does that play into this? Are we hiring those people at the moment? Are we still pursuing that, anticipating that parks are going to be open, that we're going to need to staff them?
I can start to address that question. It might be actually addressed when we get into Alder Johnson's or in Vanderleest's request later in this discussion. But it's hit or miss on the Parks Department. Depends upon if the pools are going to open or not. There was a discussion that some of the other summer help has been started to be hired and brought back in. But each department has specific, special different circumstances. Some are bringing them in, some are not. At this point, again, that probably does not affect your 2020 budget, which was already locked in, and looking at the 2020 column here for borrowing. But it does go back to what Alder Johnson had said in maybe in your 2021 budget, if you would reduce salaries, that would give you more capacity and maybe to put some of this equipment or fleet into that year's budget and not have to borrow in the future years.
Okay. Any other questions right now? Can we look at fire? Which is, I guess I'm looking at all the individual pages, Dan. I see you have the overall, which is fine. We can have the overall, but there's all the individual pages that go underneath it too. So,
I'm looking at a high-level summary. If you want at any point, I can go to the detailed pages of any one of these items.
Right. If anyone wants to see them, the detailed parts, right.
I just would request that you pull up the sheet so that we can see it on the screen.
Yeah, like move fire up a little bit, like you can see.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep, just do that for everything.
Yeah, that's good. So, Chief Litton, I'm sure you're out there somewhere.
Yes.
I'm here.
There he is. If he speaks, he appears.
I'm right across the field from you.
Anybody have anything for Chief Litton for just this portion of it, the fire station improvements?
Actually, I'd like to ask about Fire Station 3. I know that's been a real tough one for a long time. I haven't really read it over, but where are we at with that, Chief?
Well, we're really not anywhere other than the fact that it's a known variable that station needs to be replaced. It's not going to last forever. It's over 90 years old. It's crumbling. And so we, at some point, in the near future, that's going to have to be, replaced, much like the police station and, other projects that are hanging out there. So.
Is that the worst of all of them?
It is. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Stations are built, they're built with a 50-year kind of shelf life or use expectancy. We're 90 plus there. We're 90 plus at Station 1. So, those are, the idea there was that when we build a Station 3, that we would combine Station 1 and have an administrative wing on the Station 3 and then, have those two stations available for, repurposing, brownfielding, whatever you'd like to call it. But that's probably, several years down the road yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have right now.
Any other question for Chief Litton? This portion is much smaller. There will be other portions in the future, I'm sure, that we can look at for fire, but anybody have any? I wondered what Plymovent is. Plymovent.
Plymovent. So in each station, it's required to have vehicle exhaust systems in them to remove the diesel exhaust. So there's benzene and diesel exhaust, and that causes cancer. And so we have those systems in the stations, but they are over 25 years old. And I will tell you that we probably spend, I don't know, around $125,000 a year right now trying to maintain them, but they are breaking down regularly. And we cannot have a situation where the exhaust is not taken to the outside. So it's absolutely a safety and a health requirement for the firefighters.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. I didn't know what that was.
You bet.
Anybody else?
I only have one question, Alderdorf.
Yes.
That will be taken up today, but Chief, I look forward to learning more about the gold-plated dishwashers that you have in the other plan. And I say that tongue in cheek because obviously I understand commercial is more expensive, but holy moly. And that comes, I think, under a different category. So
It does. Yeah, we're just sticking to this category today.
I'm sorry, like I said, I'm saying it tongue in cheek.
Sure.
That was enough that took me by surprise.
Just joking you. He's joking.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's listed at, but yeah, we can buy, residential kind of dishwashers and buy one every 6 months, or we can buy one that's going to last for, 8 or 9 years. And when you look at the cost benefit analysis, it makes sense to buy the commercial grade. It costs more up front, but it lasts much longer. And, those stations are used.
And that's great. And I'm going to reel us in because we're not on that part. We will get to that part.
All right, my bad.
Right.
Fair enough.
Fire. Is anybody else going once, twice? All right, Parks and Rec. Let's look at that. Parks and Rec. Anybody have any questions? And I did hear Alder Gerlach. She brought something up, and I'd like to call her back to talk about Parks and Rec.
Thank you, because Alder Johnson said I made a good point, and that's the first time in my life anyone ever said I made a good point.
Right. First time in your life. Okay.
Going back to my kindergarten method of doing this, I have found 6 items under major capital projects in Parks and Rec that I simply am looking at how the director or whoever put this together prioritized them. And I found 6 things that were listed as low priority. And I thought, I do things, in a small way. And so if those 6 things didn't need to be funded this year, well, then you could save some money. The first one being the third item down, Finger Road concession stand and restrooms for $150,000. Didn't seem to be a high priority. So I thought, well, maybe if you have to save money, that's where you do it. But I have no idea.
Sure, I can answer that and give you a little more background on that one. So parks projects, when we select projects, some of them are based on, the facilities are outdated or they need to be improved or upgraded. But then other projects are selected because of user group demand to improve the facilities within the parks. So the Finger Road landfill concession stand, that's one that's being driven by the user group. So we have a 4-plex ball field complex there. And we built that, I would say, about 10 years ago. And ever since then, the user group has been demanding that we install a concession stand with restrooms. Right now, there is no concession stand or no permanent one, and there's only porta potties there. Because it's a landfill, we haven't been able to do it until recently when the DNR said that we could work on it and they would allow us to build it over the land. So in this situation, we're teaming up with the user group, and they are actually going to fund the construction of the building if the city will run the utilities to it. The cost to run the utilities is $150,000, but the cost to build the whole building will be by the user group since it benefits them. So in one sense, yes, it is a lot of money to bring utilities to it, but in another sense, it's still a pretty good deal because we're getting a free building out of it.
Okay, so may I ask you then as a follow-up question, why it is listed as priority 4?
You know, it's one of those where it's not really by a number priority. It's just listed for the year. So it's not really per priority by 1, 2, 3, and 4. So all of the priority is for 2020 are all priorities. I mean, I can give you a ranking if you're looking for that, in my opinion, but I haven't ranked them by priority.
Somebody did.
And if you look on the screen, somebody helped who helped load this document.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We did have a priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 absolutely, I'd have to look it up. 1 is absolutely must be done, you know, critical. 2 is really, really of a high demand. I can't remember 3, but 4 appears to be other, explaining a narrative before and below. So it doesn't say that it's not. It's the 4. Probably, I'm not sure how much you can see on the document that you know when people are looking through it. 4 is other, and I guess that would be appropriate. And it says see the narrative. So whoever helped you load it, and I assume it's probably your, you know, Nina helped you load it. She picked other because you have other funding sources, and I mean you have other user groups that you're working with.
Correct. That's what the other stood for. And at the time when we put this proposal together, you know, we weren't sure that this was going to play out and get approved by the DNR. But we are progressing with the discussions with the DNR, and it's very likely that it can happen this year. And like I said, the user group has been asking for this ever since we built the complex. So we would like to construct this yet this year, if at all possible, if we can get the funding for it. But yeah, I think the 4, what that stood for is there's other funding sources.
Okay, well, there goes my kindergarten method. Thank you.
I had one question on parks about, and I know that pickleball is really nice, but I wonder if maybe this is a year not to do the pickleball court.
Well, like I said, Alderdorf, a lot of things have come into play. Personally, I think it's important, but like I said, as we move forward, I'm sure there's going to be a number of pet projects and different things that I'm not willing to quite go there yet, but you know, it's definitely something to be talked about.
I mean, it might just be something that can't even be played this year with social distancing. Well, I don't know.
I'd have to ask Director Ditscheit about that as far as what your take is on that.
That's who I was asking. So
yeah.
Well, I guess with all projects, we do any engineering on the projects until we have funding in place for it. So once we get funding, that's when we begin the engineering and we bid out projects. So, you know, we're already into May. Even if we were to get the funding for any of our projects, and I think Steve is kind of in the same situation here, we just don't do the engineering in advance for a project that isn't funded. So there is always a little bit of a lag time by the time you get funding to the time it's actually constructed. So I would say it's probably likely that this project probably would not be built until next spring. But that would still fall within the year of the bonding cycle. So no, it wouldn't happen. It probably wouldn't be built this year, as with most of the projects listed on our bond request, because by the time you go through the engineering and the bidding process, it takes, you know, 4 months plus to go through that process.
No, I
into
agree.
The fall or winter.
Yeah, I mean, I follow that, but I think, you know, there's going to be a number of projects out there. I mean, the Colbert Pool issue. I mean, there's other, the baseball fields, things like that. And, you know, I hate to get to the point where one's playing against the other, et cetera. You know, I think they're all important. So, you know, I think with the time delay, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about that. So, I guess I just would like real answers, just to say, you know what, I think it might be a good project, not this year, you know, that kind of thing. I personally would fight for it, but I want to have others say, you know what, let's wait or not wait. You know, just be honest up front, and I can handle that. Thank you. That's all I got.
And I will say, as far as the pickleball courts go, that is also one of the projects that's being driven by the user groups. So we're currently building pickleball courts on the east side of Green Bay, and we don't have any on the west side. So there's a very active group who's been very vocal that we really should get pickleball courts on the west side, and we've been having these discussions for a number of years.
Right.
And I would agree that we do need pickleball courts on the west side, but like Alder Stoyer said, and what we've been talking about the whole time, it just comes down to which are the priorities that the council wants to set.
Well, and in the end, we're going to have to cut some things. We don't have to cut them right now. We don't have to come today, but in the end, we're going to have to figure out what's not a priority for this year, because I don't believe we can do the $12 million in borrowing. I'd like to maybe see us get to 10 if we possibly can, even though 8 was recommended. I don't see us getting to 8. So something we'll have to give at some point, but we're just throwing out ideas right now. We're not really making decisions right now.
Right. I was going to ask you about that. I mean, we're just talking about topics, but you weren't tried and true about making decisions today?
No, I'm not saying we're making decisions today. We haven't even started looking at equipment or at the other pieces of this. I need to plant some seeds, right, so that when it comes back around, we think about, wow, okay, well, where is the price? Do we want some pavement projects, or do we want the pickleball court? Does the wildlife sanctuary need paving? Yeah, it probably does. It probably needs some paving. And that's just another big ticket item that was on here.
Let me just give you a little background on the wildlife sanctuary paving. So now that we have the banquet hall that will be opening as soon as the COVID situation will allow us to open it, we really are going to have a huge shortage of parking stalls at that facility. And so that 400,000 is really a need. If we want to have people who are renting that space to have a good experience there.
And that's revenue generating, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Barb?
Yes.
Yeah. Something I'm concerned with, and I appreciate what we're doing here, because we're looking, we're learning. Obviously, staff knows exactly what is what and what they think is needed priority-wise. But as I think about our 5-year plan, and now we're in the year 2 of that 5-year plan, anything that's taken out to get us down to 2 or 8 million, 10 or 8 million in borrowing, so 2 to 4 million, as I look at it, is going to get pushed down that, what's left of that 5. And I'm looking at the amounts already there. And what I feel is happening is a snowball effect, where we're going to get to the end of that 5-year plan, and we're going to have to be looking at 6 or 8 million to maintain that $8 to $10 million loan cap. And I think we do need to cap it. But I actually think we need to be thinking, instead of pushing down the road, we need to be thinking about some things that we just absolutely are going to have to cut and not revisit again. And I hate to say that, but unless there's some new revenue sources coming in, and I think we are duty bound to be thinking 5 years as we do this. Otherwise, we're going to be doing what we did before, which was budget by crisis every year. I think also staff should be thinking about not only what can they maybe move down the road, but also what should be just tossed into the garbage and forgotten about for the next several years, or put on the shelf, maybe not put in the garbage.
Part of staff's problem is that as a council, we demand things of them. We say we want certain things and that they need to do certain things. And so it's really not all just up to them. I think we put them between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely. But what I know is a lot more about roads and construction and engineering. And I'm going to trust him to say, if I go to Steve and I say, Steve, this is what you have for the next 5 years, each year for borrowing. You know best what is needed. Present that to me. And, I'm more than willing to accept that with a little bit of explanation. What we have to be as alders, instead of putting them between a rock and a hard place, is we have to quit saying and listening to people, or not quit listening to people, but we have people out there screaming about roads. And that's all we hear about is the roads. And at the same time, when we try and do these roads, we hear people yelling about borrowing. And then we hear people yelling about taxes.
Yeah.
And at some point, I think we have to filter out some of that noise and understand, like last year was a tough year to raise taxes, but I stood by what we did because I think it was the right thing to do. And I think this city, again, I'll say this again, we got ourselves painted into a corner, and getting out is not going to be clean. It's going to be messy. And so, I appreciate what we're doing here, but I think we also should be steeling ourselves to the realization that there may have to be some cuts somewhere, and it may have to be in personnel, because you can get rid of a fire engine, but if you still have the firemen around not doing anything now because they don't have a fire engine, you're still looking at that's 95% of our budget every year is personnel, and I'm not trying to point fingers or anything. It's just easy to say if you don't have a fire engine, what do those guys do? It's just like if we got rid of some elements of the police department. So we're going to have, that's still 95% of your budget. So, these are the start thinking long and hard about as we're moving forward with this budget. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Galvin. All right. Any other questions for Director Ditchett on this portion of the Parks and Rec budget? No? All right. Do you want to move it up to, I think police is next. Is that right?
City Hall.
Nope. City Hall. City Hall. The roof is leaking, right? The roof leaks, I think.
Yes, it leaks. It has been for several years now. We've already patched it as much as we can. We did have an assessment of that roof done about 5 years ago, and we were told it had a lifespan of about 3 years, I believe is what the report said. So we're past the lifespan, and it is currently leaking. So
That's not good.
Yep.
All right, so we got that. And then is the mechanical upgrade, is that in here too someplace?
Yes, there would be, what that is hiring a consultant to do a study of the mechanical systems and to prepare bid documents to replace the mechanical system. So it's not actually to do the work, it's to do the planning for the work, and then we would bond for it in a future year. So if you look at the 5-year plan, that would be bonded 2 years from now.
I see.
The mechanicals are all original to the building, and they just don't function real well. And we're being, in that same report we did, the recommendation was we should be looking at replacing the mechanicals in the near future.
Okay. Any questions about the City Hall portion by any alders or anyone else? Okay. Community and economic development.
What I can tell you about that is every year, most years, there is a borrowing for the neighborhood enhancement program, and we don't typically bring it through our 20-year or 10-year borrowing, but we typically bring it through against a trust fund loan, and that is because it would be a taxable issue and it would not be an exempt issue. The purpose for it being taxable is because the end result is more on the private side and not on the public side of the for the city. So that's why it would be a taxable borrowing. Again, this is our neighborhood enhancement program. Director Blanc could answer more questions about this program if you would like.
Director Blanc, you have anything you just would like to say or explain about it? I see it a lot in the RDA.
I'm not sure.
Maybe he's not there. That's okay.
Again, what happens is this is another situation where they had some borrowing in 2019. There is times where it's kind of a revolving loan program as they invest into a property. If and when it's sold, it comes back into the program. It gets put back out into the community. This is the borrowing that he would expect that he would need to keep this program going. And then the reason why there is no borrowing in the future years, like 2022, 2024, where the program would, we would expect the program to continue. However, this is where the money as a TIP gets closed or a TID gets closed. And we last year approved that housing extension, the 1-year housing extension. We would be able to use some of that money to offset this program and not have to no longer have to borrow for this program. And we can use that 1 extension on the TID closing to use that increment to help this program. So this would be really to get us through the programming that they've been doing for many, many, many years and get them through potentially the next 2 years. And then that should be able to be replaced by a different funding source.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Police. Why do you need a fence, Chief Smith?
Thanks for asking. That was our biggest priority, and that's based on the officers and their safety concerns. They've asked for a fence ever since I've been there and probably before that. What it is fencing in a part of the parking lot so that officers can do their reports and they can load up their cars and they can do the things they need to do in the police parking lot. Right now, we allow people to walk through the stations. We've seen, or through the parking lot of the station, and we've seen several incidents across the country, most recently in Texas, where police officers were actually shot by someone walking up to their vehicles. Their concern is that they're sitting in their vehicles doing reports during the hours of darkness and other times, and someone could simply walk up to them and, who knows what bad things could happen. So that's really their biggest priority. The rest of the stuff we were able to defer for years, in some places many years, because we're hoping that in the next 4 to 7 years, we'll be able to get a new police facility.
Okay. Thank you.
Barb?
Yes.
If I could add into that, during my career at the police department, we had 3 squad cars set on fire in the parking lot.
Wow.
We many cars vandalized. We had a gang that was surveilling the police department, observed the SWAT team preparing to serve a warrant, and were able to warn the intended subjects of our warrant. We've had people escape from the station, and because we weren't able to contain them, they were able to literally just get away because they could just run anywhere. There's no way of holding them in there. So a fence was something that the police officers have been begging for probably 30 or 40 years at least. And that goes all the way back to when I started in '79.
Thank you for that explanation. I don't have any more questions on that. Does anyone else? Okay. Doesn't mean you get it, but
right, I know. Thanks for considering it.
You might get it. All right. So this last part, this is the other funding sources. Do you want to go over this for us a little bit, Director Allenbecker?
Covered at a very high level. Yes. Again, these are projects that are being requested by department heads, but they have another funding source, which means we would not be using our general levy to pay for these. TIP 22 is the shipyard. We've talked about the shipyard program for many, many years. It's underway. We originally said it would be a $9.5 million, $10 million project. Today we have borrowed, I believe we have borrowed 1 million and I think 2.5 million. So this would be to balance out the $9.5 or $10 million borrowing. As some of the projects in previous years, there's been at times people have taken out the whole project at the beginning, so would have taken out a much larger request. In this case, working with the director of development, Director Vaughn, we have phased it out, so tried to estimate how much each phase would cost us, so that we would delay the borrowing until we truly needed it. So some of the first phases were acquisition. It was for the dirt removal. This is really the next phase for moving forward with a shipyard park. I don't know if Director Ditchite or Director Vonk have any other comments on this one. But again, this is all paid for. All the debt service on this is paid directly by increment within that TIF district. It does not affect your general levy.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay.
TIF 14 is your Broadway district. This is the what we call the rail yard. And as you know, they have many projects moving forward right as we speak. And these are what they call project grants. These are some upfront money that is used for infrastructure. And these are only based on as they come up with new projects, and they through an agreement, they have agreed to assessment that within a couple of years they agreed that this assessment will be on the books. We will give them project the infrastructure upfront.
Well,
and
you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
Diane.
You're breaking up. We can't hear you. Sorry.
Did it just change?
Maybe just.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Now it's good. Now it's good.
All right. One more time. This is the rail yard, and these are for project grants upfront to pay for infrastructure for all the development going on by DDL and by the in the rail yard. Again, this is all going to be paid by increment.
Right.
We'll continue on in the parking ramp on an annual basis. We borrow the request is to borrow about $650,000 for parking ramp repairs. Recently, the parking division has been taking over the debt service on this. So that has been a nice change for the general levy. Hopefully, reduction in revenue does not affect this, but they are looking for their annual parking ramp repairs of $650,000 paid by the parking utility. Sanitary and Storm is looking for $2 million for their projects. Unfortunately, I don't have all the detail of this. This is all was detailed in the capital improvement plan that was put together by the Director of Public Works. And so there was a lot more detail, every project, how much the total cost was going to be and how much was going to be covered by the general levy, how much was going to be covered by sanitary or storm. So there is a lot more detail on these items, but this is completely covered by the sanitary storm, by their revenue that is brought in. Same thing for storm, that 6.1 million or almost 6.2 million will be covered by their rates. One thing I do want to add in this line item, the 6.1,180,000, that does include $2.5 million for a dike maintenance repair. I know that's been requested.
Yes.
So there is a lot more detail on what the Director of Public Works has in his capital improvement plan, but 2.5 of that 6.1 is dike maintenance. So
Very good.
Yep.
Okay. We have gotten through the portion that I'd hoped we get through today. Are there any questions about this portion?
I got one.
Okay. Alder Steuer.
Thank you, Alder Dorf. Maybe I'm missing something, but we're talking about the parking ramp repairs, and I had heard about the fact that there's quite a bit of monies that may not be coming into the parking utility this year, and I don't know if that at all affects any of this, or.
She just said it. Yeah, it could. She just mentioned that it could. We don't know because we don't know when it's going to be able to be opened again. That's one of those unknowns. We may have to cover part of that. Yeah. And we may not.
Well, like I said, I'm just musing out loud here. So,
okay.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So just to move forward, we're going to have to take the rest of this next time because we need to get to decision-making time. And I don't think we can go past the final meeting in June. I know originally that meeting was, I think, for liquor licenses, but I think it's going to be for more than liquor licenses. And I think that we'll have like 2, maybe 3 finance meetings before that. But we really need to get to some recommendations because then we have to turn around and start working on the budget and with the bonding for 2021, which should all come at about the same time. So we've got a lot ahead of us here. So the next meeting, which is why I didn't want to have the procurement manual, we're going to be doing the rest of this document. And that would be the equipment parts and the fleet part. But I think we've gotten through, this one took a little more because there's some explaining to do. I think now we're better at it. We're going to know what we're looking for. So I think it'll go quickly. Does anyone have any concerns with that plan?
Alder Dorf,
Yes, Alder Johnson.
no concerns. I mean, I would certainly offer up that if you think, obviously we have no idea how much more time it's going to take. If you think a special meeting is in order, I'm open to that. But I also want to be sensitive, of course, to the demands that we placed on our department heads. And so, but again, if it's something that is a necessity, I think we ought to consider that. And then I just want to add as well, I want to commend Director Ellenbecker and all of the other department heads as well. I can see how much work went into this. And we really appreciate everything that all of you have done to give us this information. I think this absolutely puts us on a good path moving forward to understand, what our 5-year forecast looks like. This is just an outstanding product. So thank you to everybody who had a hand in this.
Very nice, Alder Johnson. And I completely echo that thanks to our department heads. And so now, in an effort to get them home at some point, unless they're already home, let's move on to the next part, which is item, gosh, I don't have the board view anymore. Or is it the request by Alder Johnson about establishing the budget forecast? Is that what's next?
Let me page down.
Yes, that's the next item.
Okay, all right. Okay, agenda item number 4. So a request by Alder Johnson to the Finance Committee, which states to consider and discuss establishing a budget forecast process to position the city to respond to anticipated revenue shortfalls and additional expenses from the impact of COVID-19, which basically I think you've been pretty much doing all along, right, Director Ellenbecker? Pretty much you've been working on that.
Yes, and what I can tell you is, actually, I just want to go back a moment. Do we need to take any kind of motion? Is I guess on the CIP, I guess, is that refer to staff, or I guess there probably has to be some kind of motion that will continue next week or next bring it back, or I don't.
Motion to hold.
Okay, because then that would bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay, motion to hold by Alder Johnson. Yes. It looks like Alder Galvin said second, so I'll second by Alder Galvin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Okay. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Okay. Now on to Alder Johnson's.
I guess what I don't have, again, nothing final in front of me, but I want to let you know, I looked at, and this, I think what the Alder Johnson was saying, it was really not necessarily all the numbers at this point. It's kind of what is the process? How are we going to move forward and try to determine what are we going to be short? What expenses have gone over, and what are we going to do? How are we going to try to start getting a plan in place to try to make sure that the 2020 budget comes in, so that we don't have, that really is a balanced budget and or actuals by the time the year is over. So that's what I'm gonna go walk through right now. The last week or two, the last couple of weeks, I call it the budget review team, but the mayor, Joe, and some of the department heads and I have been meeting on different items. Specifically, we have been talking for weeks on either delaying of hires, kind of reviewing any hiring requests. That was actually brought back to the department heads again today, that every position is going to be just questioned and asked whether or not there can be delays. Can it be pushed off for a while? If it's an internal transfer, can they be shared between 2 departments for a period of time to delay the hiring? So that is already in place to reviewing any hiring at this point. And again, I'll be honest, this is I watch it a little closer on the general fund side, which affects the general levy. Again, if another funding source thinks they can support a position, I'm going to say like a transit or a sanitary storm, if they can support it, I might not watch it as closely as the one that affects our general fund or really affects general levy. So they're all being looked at, but more specific on the general levy side. On top of that, there's discussions. There's another meeting and stuff to go over overtime. We're meeting the department heads to understand what's built into their budgeted overtime.
Director Ellenbecker, it's doing it again. We can't understand you. Sorry.
If I sit up and stop rocking, does it sound better?
Yeah. Try
Okay.
that.
All right, I'll move my notes. We also are meeting with the mayor, Joe, I, and the department head to discuss overtime, to look at budget overtime, what's built into that overtime, and is there ways we can minimize it? Because in the general fund, 2.2 million is overtime. Is it not coming in again?
No, well, now it did when you put your head up, but it wasn't. But 2.2 million is overtime. You start from there.
Yep, $2.2 million is overtime, so we're going to look to see if there's any way to minimize that as the year goes on.
Okay.
There has been decision to make that for the remainder of the year, almost no travel will be allowed, and travel includes lodging, meal reimbursement, and mileage. So that what that will do is it will reduce our travel and training budget within the general fund. If there are some virtual conferences that still can be attended, especially those who still need their credits or their CPE, would probably still allow that. We're looking at no travel for the remainder of the year, and that could be a $100,000 savings in travel. There was also a look at the material and supplies line within general fund. That is a little over $1 million. We're looking at the item. We think that if we take over 5 to 10% of the materials and supplies, that could be a reduction of $50,000 to $100,000. So while we're looking at all these items within the general fund of trying to ways to reduce expenses, we continue to work through the FEMA grant to see what expenses are eligible for the 75% reimbursement. And then on the flip side, on the revenue side, we are continuing to review all the revenues to see which ones we're going to be look like we're going to fall short on. And we discussed that once before. I guess I can address it now. I was going to also address it in Alder Vanderleest's request, but so far it's like we're going to have a loss of revenue on interest for the money sitting in our investment income. And then on tavern licenses, hotel rooms, tax, citations. And so right now we are still looking at a loss of reduction of revenues anywhere between $200,000 and $400,000. So we are, of course we have increased expenses. So we are looking at ways to reduce expenses and to offset our shortfall in revenues. And again, we have these items in place of reducing, looking at overtime, reducing travel and materials and supplies at this time.
So Alder Johnson, this was yours. So I would like you to speak to it first.
Sure. And I guess ultimately what I'm looking for here, I applaud staff for obviously being proactive with addressing some of these things internally, and the fact that the mayor is convening staff to talk about this, I think is really important. And happy to see that those conversations are having. I think where I'm maybe most concerned is where council's level of oversight comes in. And of course, not wanting to end the year with a deficit. And perhaps I was just looking to staff and you know, when I submitted this communication, Director Ellenbeck, you may recall that I sort of emphasized at the council meeting that I was really interested in the process. And you took that or interpreted that correctly, and that I'm not necessarily looking for, you know, an entirely revised budget so much as it is for us to maybe really understand, of course, where the shortfalls are expected, where we might see some additional expenses. So that way, if council needs to intervene with policy related decisions, you know, that we can do that in a proactive manner and not retroactively or at a point where it's too late. So I think the rundown that you gave verbally was good. I'd love to have that in writing if that's possible.
Yes.
Just so you can more closely monitor, you know, where the impacts might be coming in the coming months. So it sounds to me like you've taken the first steps in terms of what I wanted to see out of this, and I appreciate that. I'm just wondering from your perspective, if there is a particular process that you would recommend to make sure that council is appropriately apprised of, you know, where shortfalls might be coming and if there are policy related decisions that we might need to make.
you know, at any point, this was just recommendations from the mayor and really brought down to the department heads. If the council has other suggestions on line items in which we should look at, we certainly can take a look at it. This was our first stab at where can we, at this point, based on things that have changed, the travel that has changed, where can we try to tackle some of these, the shortfall in revenues and try to reduce expenses.
So was that collective feedback from all the department heads?
It was not collective feedback. It was really a directive, really after a discussion more with most with the mayor and myself, and the Director Falls had some input on it, but that was just a strong recommendation that we look at those line items and try to find ways to cut.
Yeah, and I think that might be a worthwhile exercise. It's just, again, I don't want to overcomplicate it. You guys have enough on your plate. But I do think it would be important to get some of the director feedback. So, for example, if Director Grenier were to say, hey, I expect that I'm going to see a 25% less in parking revenue. I mean, I'm making stuff up for the sake of discussion, but I think it would be worthwhile to get some broad generalizations, but valuable generalization. We might see some shortfalls. So that way, again, if council can provide some insight in terms of where we can make some modifications. I mean, I think at this point, like, I want to be of value and support, but also more importantly, I think I want to be appropriately updated so that way council's not caught off guard, you know, at the end of the year where it's like, oh gosh, you know, because of COVID, we're $1 million short.
Right. Again, we are very actively watching the numbers. This will kind of roll into the Alder Vanderleese's request also.
But before you even start on that, I just have to tell you, he called me and he said that he really didn't need any action taken on his request, that it was late this afternoon. So I mean, and you can talk about it, but he's not really expecting anything to be done with this. He's expecting us to go through the budget process and the bonding process that we've been doing. So he just said he just wanted to tell me he didn't need any action taken on it.
Okay.
It's okay, sorry. But I thought Alder Stoyer had his hand up. But if he's going to talk, he asked himself. You're muted, Alder Stoyer. You are muted.
Yeah.
Now you're not. Nope.
I got 3 different items here. Sorry. Okay. Director Ellenbecker, you were breaking up just a little bit, so I had a hard time hearing a couple of things you were saying, and I guess maybe it was touched on, but Alder Johnson kind of brought that up as well. But as far as, you know, the revenues, like what kind of numbers we would have on the revenues that we are bringing in and the revenues that we are losing or not collecting. So that would be just my one main point, that we'd have something in writing would be great. You know, I know we've talked a lot here verbally, but that would just be one item that I would be very interested in.
I put some headphones on. Does that make a difference, or can you hear it?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is it any clearer?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try this. Were you looking for an answer on that? Again, I'm going to jump into, I have estimates, and again, there's really 4 or 5 based on feedback from the department heads. I have feedback on the line items of revenue that we believe are going to be short. And again, that's interest, tavern licenses, hotel room tax, citations. And those are the ones that are really look like they're going to have an impact on special events, and that's a couple $1,000. But at this point, those are the only ones that we are expecting to be short this year.
Well, if we could have that in writing, you went through them pretty quick, and I just would like, then have that in writing of some sort that we could look at.
Okay. What about Bay Beach?
Again, at this point, I was only tackling really the general fund. I can certainly, I had estimates on last Tuesday from on parking at that point in Bay Beach. At that point, Bay Beach, it all depends upon whether it opens or not. If it doesn't open at all, they were projecting they would have about $600,000 worth of profit, which of course would be zero profit if they do not open. So really have no revenue coming in, but they still have over $1 million worth of expenses. And those are some really fixed expenses, which are their current debt service. They have some utilities. They have a couple of full-time employees expenses that potentially so if Bay Beach does not open at all, there could be a large swing of almost $1.7 million. If it opens after, and right after Memorial Day, I think the last estimate I had gotten from Director Ditchite, it was probably about a $500,000 shortfall in revenue, less some expenses. Again, it's an estimate based on when will they be able to open. Parking utility, as of last week, I had gotten an estimate from the director, but since then he has gotten some updated information from his Chris Pierlett, and it could be closer at this point. They're projecting more $1.5 to $2 million short in revenue. I had projected $3 million at that point. Again, it all depends upon how fast the parking will open up back open back up downtown.
All right. Any other questions or comments? And Alder Johnson, what kind of motion do you want on this?
I think I would prefer refer to staff, and I would make that motion because I would like to see this come back with those numbers documented. And then I think if next meeting we decide that we're satisfied with that, we can take an alternative direction. But I do think that this is probably an important item for us to keep open and have a regular discussion on.
Okay.
So that would be my refer to staff.
To refer to staff. Is there a second? Alder Corpus Dax, did you want to second that? Yep. Okay, seconded by Alder Corpus Dax. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed, nay. All right, motion carries. Now, I think this next one is the last one on the agenda, right?
Yes.
And so he just wasn't going to be able to be here, but he just seemed to say that he didn't really need any action taken on this. So I really hate to have you go into some long explanation, and I'm sorry if you had to do a lot of work on it. I really apologize. It looks like you probably had to do a lot of work on it.
Most of the things I was going to discuss, I've already pretty much said in the previous item. The only thing I wanted to bring up, and that was something that Alder Vanderleest had asked, like a 10% reduction, and I can kind of address that on the last Thursday. But a 10% reduction on just the general fund side would be $8.6 million. At this point, we believe that revenues would be short $400,000 or $500,000 on the high end, and maybe some additional expenses. So I just want to bring that to your attention. A very high level projection of even a 1% reduction would be a reduction of $862,000. So I just want to kind of put that in perspective. 10% probably seems a little high.
He kind of walked that back because I talked with him about that.
Okay.
I talked with him about how much of our funding goes to salaries. And, cutting the salaries, or we already settled contracts. I mean, we had a really pretty good discussion on budget this afternoon when we spoke. So he really kind of walked that. So I don't believe he's expecting that at all. Okay. I think a receive and place on file would be a real nice motion here. If someone wants to make that.
I would make that motion, and Alder Vanderleest can pull it at council if he wants something other done with it.
Perfect. Thank you, Alder Johnson.
Second that.
And seconded by Alder Galvin. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, motion carries. So, okay, I am got to get to a different view here. All right, we are on the contingency fund, which we have $150,000. Is that correct?
At the time, the person pulled the number, that is still correct. We just had not made the adjustment or the journal entry for the $6,300 that was used for sandbags. So it's really $6,300 less from that 150. It's just the journal entry has not been completed when she pulled the number.
Okay. And then the next Finance Committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 26th. That might be the day we open up. Who knows? I don't know. Could be. But prepare for a long meeting if we're going to get through the rest of that document. So be ready. If there's no other comments, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned by
Second.
Alder Galvin, second by Alder Johnson. All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Motion carries. We're adjourned.